Hey, it's Clayton Olson, and in today's video, we're going to talk about vulnerability in leadership. And to help me unpack this topic and to bring his expertise into the room, I've got my friend Jeff Munn on the call with me today.
Hey,
And
Clayton.
hey, glad to have
Yeah.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm really happy to be here. You and I have talked about a little bit about this possibility, and I'm just excited to see what comes up in this conversation.
Yeah. And for those of you that have never met Jeff before, Jeff helps founders and business owners move from 8 to 9 figures while making more time for their vision, their health, and their families, which seems really important because anybody that's working with that kind of energy probably might be imbalanced, I imagine.
Oh,
And
I run into it all the time, and it's like the founders, like I see these opportunities for my company, and I know that possibility for growth is there, but if I give any more to this business, I'm gonna collapse. And so
yes.
it's like they have to be able to build that space just
Mm.
from a perspective of sustainability.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm hearing like almost helping people move from a sprint to a marathon.
Yeah.
I mean,
And a
yeah.
marathon that feels good, not a marathon that feels like, Heartbreak
Yeah.
Hill at Boston, right?
Totally. Yeah. Splints and all that. Yeah. We met at a dinner with Rich Litvin and John Patrick Morgan out
Yeah.
in California, and soon realized we had a lot in common. We both live in Colorado. We enjoy beauty. We're both coaches, and as we got to know each other, we were thinking, how can we begin to have these two worlds that we both sit in? Jeff really sits squarely in the leadership space
Mhm.
and works with people around relationship. And I sit very squarely in the relationship space and also helping people with leadership. So there's an intersection here that we're going to really bring to life on this call. And I'm excited to talk with you about vulnerability in leadership specifically because I think vulnerability is a real keyword. It's a buzzword right now that has
Mhm.
been around for maybe the last decade, and I think I think there's some misconceptions about it,
Mhm.
and I'm excited to dig in and really see how this works in your world with the people that you talk to, because I know that it's very front and center in mine as a relationship
Yeah, of
coach.
course. I would think it would be. Yeah, I mean, with Brene Brown and her rise to fame, vulnerability has become a really popular topic. And I think it shows up in leadership more often than most people think it does, or maybe even think it should. But I don't know if you've spent any time with a powerful leader, but when they are able to be vulnerable, and we can talk about what that means, but it's just, I see leaders who are willing to be vulnerable. They have people who are more bought into their vision, they're more loyal, they're more focused, they're more willing to work hard in service of the founder's vision. There's just all of this potential upside. And, there's this other side of, what we might call over disclosure or too much information, or, it's like, you don't want to be crying in a puddle on the boardroom floor. There is a line, but I think that line is further than most people think about it, because for the most part we see almost no vulnerability in business or in founders running their companies.
Yes, yes, yeah. So let's actually talk about vulnerability
Yeah.
and what vulnerability is, just so we have a working definition, and we're breaking it down into its parts.
Yeah,
We
tell me what you think it is, because
reality.
I haven't really spent a
Yeah.
lot of, like,
Hmm.
for me, I'm kind of I know it when I see it, rather
Yeah.
than, yeah, it means this.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So, the way that I see vulnerability is that as I was journaling on this earlier today, I was thinking about the words authenticity and transparency that
Uh-huh.
came. And
Uh-huh.
although I don't think that authenticity and transparency capture it perfectly, I do think that there's elements of both of those in vulnerability. And what I mean by authenticity is that there is a way in which one may be bringing uh, the, the realness of where they're at into the
Hmm.
conversation. So there may be a revealing of their emotional experience. There may be a revealing of one's limitations,
Yeah.
revealing, and when I say limitations, also what I mean is like the boundaries by which that person operates.
Uh-huh.
So, for instance, what they're capable of, what they're not capable of, their strengths and weaknesses, and also their capacity to, along with their limitations, uh, a real noticing of where maybe they need to learn
Mm-hmm.
and grow and be a
Mm-hmm.
student. And then I think the transparency piece might be something that is around what that person's emotional experience is, how they're really feeling about something,
Yeah.
which ultimately what I believe it does is it helps create more human connection or empathy. And for the people in this space of that vulnerability to feel safer around that person, to feel more enrolled and more connected, which I think is incredibly important in personal relationships and also in a business context as well. So that'd
Yeah,
be a
there's a woman named Amy Edmondson who's
yeah.
done a lot of work around what she calls organizational safety that gets it at that. Like, do people feel safe, for example, to, when their boss, looks at everybody in the meeting and says, we're going to do this and I want to hear your opinion, and is kind of standing like glowering at them. Do they feel safe to say, actually, I'm not sure that's a good idea? And in most organizations, uh, it's not safe. And
Yes.
not surprisingly, the organizations where it is safe, they do better because they have more ideas to like work from and work through. So I think that to me feels part of this whole vulnerability. Like I feel like if the leader says, I don't know the answer and is sincere about it,
Mhm.
people are going to chime in. They are going to offer their perspective. They are going to have that trust that you're mentioning. So yeah, I think there's some interesting things to play with there.
Yeah, absolutely. The
Yeah.
question that comes to mind hearing this is why is it that you think there is a misconception out there around vulnerability being seen as weakness or vulnerability being seen as something that other people might exploit? What do you think's
Mm.
going on there?
I think because so my experience with vulnerability is that when I see someone else do it, it's captivating and I'm like drawn to that person.
Mm,
And when I try to do it myself, it
mm.
feels scary as hell and it feels like I'm exposed and it feels like, like I'm the wounded animal and I'm kind of showing this predator that I'm weak.
Under the water.
I feel, yeah, like I feel like I'm risking my life literally doing it. So I
Mm,
think that's why it has that reputation because it feels so, unless I mean, I don't know that you really get used to true vulnerability because you're always a little bit on that edge. But
yeah.
until you see how powerful it is and how it like kind of bonds someone and what the response is when it happens and you admit you need help, you admit a personal weakness or something you're struggling with,
Mm.
um, it's just really scary.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm hearing that so the resistance to vulnerability is essentially just that person's subjective experience of how they feel and the consequences they think might occur if they
Right,
were to reveal.
right.
So do you think that it's a prerequisite then that someone needs to feel safe in order to be vulnerable?
Mm. I'm I'm gonna say it depends.
Yeah,
So I think if you're talking about a relationship where the assumption is that the people are on relatively equal footing,
yeah,
I think yeah, that safety is probably really important, and I'd be curious in your perspective on that. When I'm thinking about where you've got a clear founder or business owner who has people reporting to him or to her, um, I feel like they have to model it.
mm,
And in their modeling it, they are creating the safety for other people to be vulnerable. I feel like it's the role of the leader to go first. I don't think it works the other way around.
yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I think that what is interesting about it is it's the same in personal relationships. I
Mm,
think that we have to step in and be willing to be a leader in our relationships. We
yeah,
have to step in, and it doesn't mean that we are always leading, right? That torch might be passed back and forth between two people, or a number of people. But speaking of maybe friendships or some group like that, but I do think that without risk, we are going to end up uh, creating a fragile ecosystem in our relationship. And the more that we can risk, the more that we build a robustness into it. And so
Yeah.
I completely agree with you that safety actually is something that comes after that initial revealing of
Can I actually share a client story? And it's a
yeah, go for it.
relationship story, but so one of my clients, he runs a company. Um, he he and his wife have this fascinating relationship. I think they'd both be classified as either avoidant or anxious avoidant, if you know attachment theory. So we got into conversations about his marriage, and he's been with his wife for 20 years, and they still don't really disclose very much to each other. They're kind of on their own islands. And I asked him why, and he said, "Well, I'm not sure she's the one."
Mm.
It's really interesting.
20-year
So
marriage. Yeah.
20 marriage. And
Mm.
it's like, well, how will you know if she's the one unless you're willing to like be vulnerable and see what happens? Like, someone's got to go first.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I really resonate with what you said.
I love that you brought that up. Yeah, this echoes
Yeah.
so many of the conversations that I have with clients as well. Is this you can't really truly see who is in front of you until you're willing to show up and come out from behind the armor to not have your own armor obstructing your view of another person.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
incredible. So I'd love to take this now from where we're at a little bit deeper into the world of leadership.
Sure.
So do you believe that somebody can be an effective leader without being vulnerable?
So there's one, if you want to call it a use case, we can call it a use case. There's one particular scenario that I want to explore that I see
Mm,
typically when I'm beginning to help a founder. It's one of the things that shows up is that this person to this point has been the person who made all the decisions, been the person who's like the smartest person in the room, figured it out, hired people, sometimes micromanaged those people.
mm,
And I think the first step of vulnerability, and probably the most important one, is to say, I can't do it all. I need help.
mm.
And if I need a CFO or a head of sales or a head of product, um, I need to be vulnerable enough to hire someone smarter than me
Yeah.
in that particular area. I can manage the vision,
Yep.
but I want a finance person who knows more about finance than me.
Yes.
And I want to trust that person and let them run and make suggestions and, and honor those suggestions. And that feels really scary to someone
Mm,
who's been doing everything themselves. That feels incredibly dangerous. What
yeah.
if I hire the wrong person? What if
Mm,
it doesn't
mm,
work out? They will make up things as to I can't find any. I would love to hire a chief financial officer. I can't find one,
yeah.
you know? And
Yeah.
it's really just their own vulnerability and being scared and having all their self-worth tied into doing everything that's showing up.
Mm, yeah. Beautiful distinction. I'm hearing a theme of letting go of control in one's
Yeah.
company is a form of
Yeah.
vulnerability. And
Very.
if you want to actually be more than a solopreneur and have a team, you already have to practice a certain level of vulnerability even to get to that next stage.
Absolutely. I mean, I ask people all the time, do you want control or do you want growth?
Mm,
Because if you want growth, you have to give up control. There's
yeah.
just no other way.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. I think that really overlaps with personal relationships as well. You've got
Yeah.
to get control if you want growth. Yeah. Beautiful. So, in what ways do you think that the traditional view of leadership might conflict with the current concept of vulnerability? Let's maybe just go into that a little bit.
Well, I mean, and I don't think the military is even using a military model at this point, but when you think of the
Yeah.
classic
Mm,
military command and control, you
mhm,
know, if you got an order, you did it. You did not question, you did not say why, you did not question the leader's authority to make that distinction or the leader's expertise, and the leader didn't feel like they could show any weakness
Mhm.
around their decisions. It's like I have to be 100%, I'm sending boys into war. I have to be 100% confident, even if I'm not.
Mhm.
And so I think about that when you say traditional leadership, and I think
Yep.
I think that model's outmoded. I think most people get that it's outmoded,
Yes.
but I think we kind of default into it when we're not paying close attention.
Yeah. Got it. Got it. Okay. And I think that, as you bring up this example of the military and truly like what's on the line there for people, like literally their
Yeah.
lives. Um, if we took this concept of vulnerability into, say, highly competitive environments in business, do you think it still holds up that vulnerability is still an asset and carries with it something that is going to help that leader in like really competitive cutthroat situations?
Do you want the best information so you can make the best decisions?
Mm. Yeah, say more.
Then vulnerability helps because you
Yeah.
have to say, I don't know the answer here. I need your help. Or, you've talked with this customer, you've talked with this stakeholder, you've talked with this, I don't have that information. Help me. Let's make this decision together.
Great.
You have to be willing to let go of stuff. You have to be willing to push authority down. And
Mm.
all of that feels vulnerable and dangerous and is incredibly valuable.
Okay, beautiful. So, what are some other ways that vulnerability can show up in leadership that it's going to be beneficial to both the person who is being vulnerable and also how it impacts the team? I'm hearing asking for help is a big one, right? So,
Yeah.
understanding
Yeah.
one's limitations and being willing then to recruit others to come and fill in the gaps. Are there other ways in which leaders exercise vulnerability that can really superpower morale and create team and effectiveness throughout the company?
So I don't know any leader that hasn't done something they regret, lost their temper,
Mm,
uh, slammed a door, berated someone in front of their peers,
mm,
and to say, wow, I screwed up. To have that emotional intelligence to recognize, you know, we're not always 100%.
mhm.
Our people aren't always 100%. To
Yep,
acknowledge our humanity,
yep.
both in ourselves and our team. I mean, to me, like you can call that emotional intelligence, you can call it vulnerability. I think there's some overlaps there. Um, you want a high functioning team. I think that kind of work is essential.
Mhm, mhm. Got it. Are there any misconceptions here where someone, or maybe it's not a misconception, but is there any way in which, I know that this is context dependent, but where vulnerability may actually be a detriment
Like,
to,
where's the line?
yeah, where do you draw the line as to where
So
it
I'm gonna
actually,
I'm gonna flip this on you, okay?
right,
Because I
right, yeah,
think because I have an idea and I think it might be similar to what you're gonna say. I don't know. It's
yeah,
not like we rehearsed this, right?
yeah.
So tell me in a relationship,
Mhm.
where do you think vulnerability is a detriment?
So we were talking about this earlier, I think over disclosure.
Yeah.
And so I think and I would almost put that into the camp of like too much transparency.
Uh-huh.
And I would say that, one of the things that I see happen within people that are uh, dating and they're beginning a relationship, there is a sometimes an insecurity that's there that if they don't get it all out on the table immediately and find out whether this person can accept them the way that they are, they can't
Yeah.
deal with that tension. And so
Yeah.
there's oversharing that happens too early in the relationship and they end up blowing out the other person. They end
Uh-huh.
up way too much of who they are on the table and asking the other person to hold it. So I think that there is a taste and a timing that is necessary in personal relationships where we are risking something, but we're also being relational with them as well. We're understanding what is the capacity the relationship can hold right now. How much of my truth can the relationship hold, and being respectful and honoring of that. And that takes a little bit of calibration and some practice. So I would say that's one place where vulnerability can be a detriment. Another is also what aspect of the person is sharing their internal world. And
Hmm.
so if I'm sharing from an adult ego state, meaning
Uh-huh.
that I've got my back and there's something happening within me, but I'm actually kind of taking care of that inner child aspect of me and I'm
Yeah.
revealing something about it, but I'm holding it as an adult. That is very different than if I'm huddled into the fetal position, metaphorically speaking, or quite
Yeah.
literally,
Yeah.
and basically looking for mom or dad to save me from myself and trying to enlist my partner to be there for me repeatedly in that way. I think that
Right.
is where we can put too much on our partner and we can end up losing respect. We can end up losing trust. And uh, we're not willing to carry our own burden, but we're in some ways asking our partner to. So I
Yeah.
think that type of vulnerability is we're crossing the line into embodying more of a victim mindset versus an
Uh-huh.
adult.
Yeah.
How does
I
that
think
translate to your world? Yeah.
yeah, it really resonates. The over disclosure piece and especially the like, what are you asking this other person to take care of that you're not able to take care of in yourself?
Yeah.
I know of um I know of leaders. I've never coached someone like this, but I've run across people like this in my professional career that they constantly needed reassurance.
Mm.
And so that kind of vulnerability, I don't know about this. I kind of need, are you guys are you with me? Can we do you think I'm doing the right like that's
Mm.
that I think is probably overall negative because it doesn't, the leader, it's this really interesting role. So you're in this collaborative relationship with people with respect to some things, their particular functions, sales, finance, whatever. Um, but at the same time, you're the boss, you're the leader, you're the one who's ultimately responsible for the success of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And to do anything that uh, shows up as abdication of that,
Mm.
I think that's where the line is, right?
Mm.
Um, and I haven't thought about it a lot, but that's what was coming up for me as you were talking. Like there is this vulnerability that crosses the line into abdication where, the person's overwhelmed or they're having a breakdown or they just have lost their confidence. And uh, if they show it, it's going to be a problem. I mean, we're just finishing up the regular NFL season, so it's firing season for coaches. And one of the things that they talk about is, the coaches lost the locker room. And I
Mm.
think it's that kind of dynamic. Do you lose the company?
Mm.
You show up too vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's really interesting. And on the other extreme of that, what I hear you saying in some ways is somebody abdicating their power,
Uh-huh.
unseating themselves from the role of being a leader, which they are rightfully in,
Yeah.
and giving away their power, not claiming it. And then I see on the other side too, and these are some of the founders that I've worked with too, that where
Yeah.
maybe they're confusing vulnerability with kind of getting big and having an emotional expression
Uh-huh.
where one of like anger or really being stressed or turning into a tyrant and then thinking, well,
Yeah.
I'm being authentic, I'm expressing my emotions authentically.
Right.
But again, it's like they're unseating from something
Right.
and allowing to be taken either by the insecurity or taken by the
Yeah.
anger.
Yeah, you're right. There's like an over under, right?
Yeah.
And so there's an over under on emotion and emotional intelligence, and then there's an over under on authority, right?
Mhm.
Like, oh, I'm not offering any feedback or any input on how I run my business.
Right.
So that's,
Yeah.
under vulnerable. And then there's the help me take care of me. I'm help, the abdication piece, which
Mm-hmm.
is kind of over indexing on vulnerability.
Interesting. Yeah. I'm hearing a piece in there too that I think is worth underscoring is that even the giving feedback to your employees is actually a vulnerable act. Like
Oh,
being
100%.
really right. So not necessarily just asking for help, but also being able to step in and give somebody an honest reflection of their performance is a risk. And
Yeah.
so it might not necessarily look like you're revealing your limitations. You might be bringing to light somebody else's limitations for them to be with,
Hmm.
another form of
And
vulnerability.
that feedback, I mean, similar things show up in relationship, but the
Yeah.
feedback process, I think the fear is, well, if I tell this person what I really think of their performance, they'll leave. They
Mm.
have other options. I don't want them to leave.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm willing to accept good enough to avoid that risk.
Mm.
So the whole company is compromised
Mm.
because you're not willing to give authentic, vulnerable feedback and
Mm.
hear it for it goes the other way too, right?
Yeah.
And so an employee probably feels that more. It's like, well, if I really gave my boss feedback on what I really think of him or her, I'd get fired.
Mm.
So it's like there's this incentive to be not fully honest
Mm-hmm.
within the structure because of the employment dynamic.
Yeah. Yeah. Same with relationship, right? Is where there's a concern that if I was to really bring honest feedback or get honest feedback, that the current structure that seems that maybe it's a C plus is just
Uh,
going to fall apart completely versus actually move to a B or an A.
yeah.
And so, yeah, there's risk.
You
There's risk.
have to be willing to risk the whole
Yeah.
thing falling apart whenever you're trying to improve anything.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Got it. How has your own perspective on leadership evolved over the years of you and your career and then moving into the work that you do now? Like, have you seen a palpable evolution of what vulnerability is and how you bring it to the table?
I'm a pleaser from way back, Clayton.
Mm.
So I think the evolution has been not exclusively dealing with that, but like really recognizing that in myself and when it gets in the way.
Mm.
And whether it was later in my corporate career, being able to say when I thought, my boss or my boss's boss was doing something that was not heading in the right way, and
Mm.
actually being willing to take that risk,
Yeah.
to now, as a coach,
Mm.
if I'm worried about my client liking me, I am not doing a good job just by
Mm.
definition.
Mm. Mm.
So it's almost like it is, I have to provide direct feedback. That's my job.
Yeah.
And if I'm not able to do that, if I am not evolved enough to be able to do that, I'm going to struggle.
Yeah.
Yeah. How's it shown up for you?
Yeah. So I am a recovering overachiever. And
I got that too.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
so mine, I look back into my corporate career when I was in my 20s and doing sales, and
Uh-huh.
uh, there was a lot of this mentality of, what have I done for the company lately?
Yeah.
And uh, there's a way in which I was unwilling to admit when I was on empty. And I was
Mm.
unwilling to admit uh, when I had hit my limits. And what ended up happening is I just created some real sickness in my body.
Uh-huh.
And I got out of that because I had a toxic relationship with myself that I then kind of projected onto the company, thinking, okay, it's them. And, maybe there was a little bit there, but the more
Yeah.
important thing was that there was a relationship I had with myself that was invulnerable, that was actually killing me from the inside out. And, moving into being an entrepreneur, there's still something that I have to dance with about overachieving and how much can I actually do. And also, I think this blends really nicely with the performer part of me
Mhm.
that wants things to be and look a certain way, so that um, there is a level of polish and professionalism. And I think my big journey over the last decade has been continually coming deeper into my heart and allowing my imperfections to be seen, and for things to be messy, and for things to not always be together, and still realize that there's value in what I'm doing, and also that I'm actually lovable in my relationships when I don't have it together. And that has just been a constant dance and practice that I continue to be in and learn multiple layers of. over and over.
I've struggled with that one too, because you know, we're both entrepreneurs, we're both building businesses,
Yeah.
and that road is not always, you know, straight up and to the left.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's hard sometimes for me to tell my wife, you know, it's like, this isn't looking like a good month. I'm a little worried about this, or I think this, you know, this
Mm.
client fired me, or whatever, you know, happened to happen. I've gotten better at it.
Yeah.
I notice less charge in my body when I'm saying those things than I used to, but I used to just like completely lock down whenever there was any
Yes.
bad news to deliver, because, you know, my parents, my mom in particular, did not
Mm.
we were not a very disclosing family. We were the type of family that, you know, was like, well, I didn't want to worry you until like I absolutely, you know, until the person absolutely had to say something, they wouldn't say anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've noticed too in myself this kind of clenching up piece of
Hmm.
unwilling to maybe be with some of these uncomfortable emotions of feeling vulnerable, maybe feeling helpless, maybe feeling confused, not knowing what direction to take. The less capacity I have to be with that, where I go into invulnerability,
Uh-huh.
the more isolated I become,
Uh-huh.
and the more pressurized I become on the inside. Which, as
Mm.
I've gotten older, I can start to really feel the impact of that on my health, the
Yeah.
impact of that on my sleep. And so it's something that I can't go to sleep to anymore. And so the only path out to really being able to clear it has been a path of vulnerability. It feels like it's been almost uh, a cross that I've now had to carry in terms of that's just my path as
Yeah.
I've evolved. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
I can relate to that a lot. Um, yeah. Yeah. I
So
think
just
it's,
as we round the corner, yeah, you're
yeah.
welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for throwing the question back at me. Um, as we round the corner on this, two questions. Feel free to answer either one. First one would be, or both of them, just the way that the world is evolving, especially
Uh-huh.
like post-pandemic.
Uh-huh.
Is there a way that you see vulnerability being more necessary than it's ever been? Like, is there a timeliness to this message that we have right now?
Hmm.
So I'd love to
Are
hear
you
the
going
other.
to tell me the second question too, or you
The second question right now. Yeah, the second
Okay,
question
okay.
is, what primary piece of advice would you give anybody that's listening to this who is a founder, who is working with a team, and is wanting to practice vulnerability or be more vulnerable without jeopardizing their career progression or the work that they're doing?
Yeah. I'm happy to answer both of those questions. So I think post-pandemic, um, what I'm noticing, and I noticed that, you know, when you and I were in Santa Monica,
Mhm.
I realized, you know, there were a number of people there who I'd had regular contact with, who I knew pretty well, and I had never met them in person. And I think before the pandemic, that was much more rare. And since the pandemic, we've just we haven't fully gone back to the physical world. We're much more willing to do things online than we were before, because it's easy, it's convenient. You don't have to get on a plane, you know, whatever. Um, and I think, first of all, acknowledging that the benefits of like being in the same physical space with someone, I think is really important.
Mhm.
And the flip side of that is, if you're not able to be in the same physical space with someone, I think that vulnerability piece, that emotional intelligence piece, that, you know, even intimacy piece
Mhm.
is way more important, because it's just a way to create more connection virtually
Right.
than you otherwise would kind of automatically create if you were in the same physical space with each other.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Um, and the second question, I've worked with clients on this. It's like the beautiful thing about vulnerability is it's not a 1 or a 10.
Mm.
You know, it's not, you're either going 0 or you're going 100 miles an hour. You can try it out at 5 miles an hour. Like,
Mhm.
what's something that just feels just a little bit dangerous?
Mm.
try that out, see how it feels, see what the reaction is, see how people respond to it,
Yeah.
see if it creates more connection. And then you try a little more, and then you try a little more. Like it's a series of ongoing real-time experiments.
Yeah.
And it's okay to screw up because one, vulnerable, it's over or under, all of these things are fixable. They're
Mhm.
repairable. And just recognizing that you always have the opportunity to repair if you did something in a way that you didn't intend. It's kind of your
Wonderful.
backstop, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's a combination of both those things.
Mhm. Love that.
Yeah. How would you answer those questions?
Yeah. I'll start with the second one first
Uh-huh.
and then see what comes up for the first one about the post-pandemic. Um, I mean, first, I just want to actually agree with you. I love the insight you're saying that now that we've moved more into this virtual world, we've got companies that have closed down their offices in cities and people have moved remotely completely. What I hear you saying is that there's a way that we have to learn how to create safety now
Mhm.
more intentionally than just having it be a given when we're in the same room with somebody. Because, when we're in the same room, there's a way in which our body might tune to the other person. We kind of realize that they're a friend versus a foe. But online, it's a different story, and
Yeah.
we don't get all that same information. So we actually we have to lean more into this. So I think that's a beautiful invitation and something that was yeah, very insightful. What I would say about the advice for any aspiring leader that does not want to jeopardize their career and practice this is to look at your personal relationships as the vehicle, as the dojo
Uh-huh.
for this type of work.
Yeah.
I look at my relationship with my fiance and the ways in which I have been uh, tested and challenged, and the ways we both tested each other and challenged each other. The skills that we've developed have easily translated into my relationships with my friends and have
Hmm.
also translated very much into the relationships I have with my coaching clients and the people that I hire and that I work with. And so, if you're looking for a place to start, right, where maybe the question would be, where are you holding back in your relationship right now, your personal relationship?
Yeah.
Where are you staying comfortable? Where are you not allowing yourself to lean into a little bit more of that edge and the things you're revealing and the things you're saying? Because one of the beautiful, uh, I think, aspects of a intimate partnership is that there's usually a lot more safety there for you to make some mistakes
Hmm.
and be loved for them. And as your nervous system starts to code that you're safe being seen as yourself, revealing, you can take that out into the world and start to practice it in other places.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that's a beautiful suggestion. And I have had clients who have told me they feel way more exposed and dangerous in their relationship than at work because at work, they're in charge. Their proverbial name is on the door, even if it isn't.
Yeah.
So sometimes I will have them actually experiment with something at work before they take it home.
And go the other direction.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it depends on both of those spheres, right? But yeah, I think that, I mean, what we're talking about is experimenting, right? Talking about experimenting with something that's inherently uncomfortable, but potentially really valuable.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm. Yeah.
beautiful.
Awesome. Well, Jeff, any final words on vulnerability as we wrap this up? Anything that you feel like you want to name that's come up over the last half hour to close this out?
I'm feeling really grateful now that of your willingness to like play.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed the conversation, and I don't feel like I have anything to add.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks. Me
yeah.
too. Great. And I hope that anybody that has been watching or listening has found this valuable. If you have any questions, comments, you can post them in the comments below this video. And if people want to get in touch with you, Jeff, or
Yeah.
see what you're up to, where would they go?
Yeah, probably the best. I mean, if you want to connect with me on socials, I am most present on LinkedIn. I also have a YouTube channel where I put out a decent amount of stuff. Nothing compared with yours, Clayton, but I do put out a decent amount of stuff. Or just send me an email, jeff@jmunn.com, and would love to hear from people if anything resonated with someone on this conversation and they want to talk more about it. I'm totally open to that.
Awesome. Okay,
Yeah.
I'll put those links in your email
Mhm.
in the description below. All right,
Great.
thanks for watching, everybody. Jeff, thanks for coming on and being
Yeah.
vulnerable and
You
opening up
too.
this topic. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks. Take care.